Hi everyone, it's Jackie at Spare Room Studio. I'm back today to finish colouring this page called Woodland Dryad. It is in the book Mountain King, the new release by R.J. Hampson, which was only released last week. I was really happy to receive it a day earlier than I expected, and I was really impatient to get started, so I began colouring this page with Ohuhu alcohol markers. And I'm going to finish colouring it with some coloured pencil just to tidy up some detail, add some highlights and some shadows. And the pencil case that I have with me here has Artex pencils, a few Polychromos pencils, a few Lyra Rembrandt, and some Prismacolor. So I'll be using a combination of those, whatever colours I see fit. I think I might try to restrict it mostly to the Prismacolor because we've got some greens here. I like some of the greens that I've got in the Prismacolor. We'll just see how it goes anyway. Hopefully this will not be a very long video because I don't have an awful lot left to do on here. But I thought that I might try and colour with you on camera because there were a few of you said you'd like to see it finished, and I've been having a bit of a frustrating time recently. I might be in need of a new blade in my sharpener here. I've had several Artex pencils that have been crumbling, and this chartreuse, which is my favourite colour in the Prismacolor, is constantly breaking. And it looks like the barrel might actually be starting to split on this one. That might be something to do with the problem. Yeah, it just keeps, the lead inside just keeps crumbling and it's very frustrating. Alright, so let's see what we can do without that one. I've got this one here which is called Pale Sage, which is a really nice light colour with a hint of green. So we might just do a little bit of softening up of some areas with that. I've already put a little bit of white Prismacolor on some of these areas, which you can see are lighter than the others. Now I could have used the colourless blender a little bit more than I did on this one, but I just feel like putting some pencil on here and see what we can do with pencil. And I think it's useful too. A couple of you have mentioned that you'd like some ideas of how to finish off your alcohol marker pages with a bit of pencil. So what I'm doing at the moment is I've got this Pale Sage. I'm looking for areas that would be closest to a light source. So with this grass or plant, whatever it is, the highest point that may be catching the light source, we have to improvise a little bit here. There is a full moon there, but obviously that the way that that's drawn, it's not going to be casting light down here, but we can assume that she's sitting in the moonlight. The moonlight would actually be catching the back of her head at the top there a little, as with these things. So we're just improvising a little bit here. So what I've chosen to decide on is that I'm looking for the points that would be highest, so therefore catching the light first, because in all reality in a nighttime scene we wouldn't be seeing as much colour as we've got here. It would mostly be in shadow, and there might be some very bright highlights where the moon was catching things, if it's a full moon and very bright. But of course this is a colouring book and an illustration, and so therefore it's not going to be lifelike or realistic. It just has to be suggestive of what the scene might be, and the viewer will fill in all the rest of the details for us or make whatever story they wish to interpret the scene as. So I'm not going to do an awful lot of that, but just a little bit. And then I've put some down here because she's growing from the tree stump, so she looks like she's growing from the wood, but she has this lovely outfit of leaves. She's got leaves for hair, so she's almost like a tree herself. So instead of leaving this all browns, I'm actually introducing a little bit of the green down here as well, and that just implies the relationship of her to this tree stump, and you know that they've all got some sort of connection or relationship to each other, and that's why I'm just introducing a little bit of the green. In reality, there may not be any green on there, or there could be. There could be some algae or moss or lichen. You know, there could be, but for the purpose of a illustration, I'm using the green just to imply that relationship between the things on the page. That's all I'm doing with it. And I'm not going to use a lot. In fact, that might be all I use. You know, just that little tiny bit here and there, just to reinforce that relationship. And down here, I'm not actually going to colour the ground. I want this to be like it's a self-contained composition like that, and I don't feel like this needs any background either, because that's going to detract from there. So I'm going to leave all of this white, and I'm happy to leave that as it is down there as well. Now, as is always the case, I'm just explaining what I'm doing, you know, the choices that I'm making, and they're personally my opinion and my choices, and this is not to say that this is the way to do it. It is a way that it can be done, and so I'm just sharing with you my ideas and, you know, my way that I would approach it. So hopefully anything that I say in these sorts of videos when I'm colouring like this is just taken in that vein, that it purely is just how I like to colour, and I'm just offering you an alternative to any way that you might colour if you are dissatisfied with the way you are colouring. I never do any of these videos with the hope to change your thinking on how you're doing things. It's merely offering an alternative that you can have a think about and perhaps try, and it's never a be-all and end-all sort of decision when I'm saying these things. This is just this particular moment in time. This is how I'm choosing to colour it. And if you give me this book in a month's time or a year's time, I may be choosing to colour it completely different at that point in time. Who knows? These things aren't static. They don't stay the same way forever. And we evolve and change and so on as we go. Now, this is an Artex pencil. It is the chartreuse. It's the equivalent of the Prismacolor chartreuse. It's a very similar colour. So given that my Prismacolor won't sharpen, I've started using this one a lot more. But unfortunately, I've been finding, even with my Artex pencils, I've had a few that I just cannot, see, this is one of them. I can't seem to sharpen it. I've tried all different shapes of points and so on, and it's just like that core is crumbling all the way through. So I'm really disappointed, because when I first got the Artex pencils, obviously the colours that I was using didn't seem to be doing that. And I was really happy with the Artex pencils. I felt like they were a bit of a compromise for not spending the money to buy a set of Prismacolors, because it had very similar colours, even though they feel very different. It had a similar range of colours in it. And I thought, you know, that might be a useful alternative. And now I'm just actually using a polychromos here, which is grass green. You can see that this has actually been sharpened down and used. This has been a favourite. I've had absolutely no trouble with the core or lead breaking in my polychromos. So I'm going to have a bit of a think about some of my supplies. I watched a video this morning which was Wendy's colouring, and Wendy was unhauling or destashing colouring books. And at the moment I feel pretty happy that I've got books that I enjoy, and I'm trying to get to all of them and colour in all of them. It's merely the fact that I have too many that I'm not colouring in them. It's not that I don't want to. And so I don't feel like I need to do a destash of my books at this point in time. However, I do feel like I need to look at some of my supplies, because last night I was sitting on the couch colouring in Wildflower Folk, and I got my watercolour pencils out, and I've got one of these lovely big pencil cases with Derwent watercolour pencils, and I've also got graphitin in there, and a huge set of cheaper watercolour pencils that I bought on Amazon. And it was just a whim. I saw them and they were a good price, and I felt like I needed more colours in watercolour pencils. And I bought them, and I've never really been very happy with them. And last night I was trying to colour with them, and I just found that, I'm just checking that to see what it looks like in the camera. Okay. I felt like they were just not performing as I want a watercolour pencil to perform. And I tried colouring with them as a coloured pencil without activating them, and they were kind of okay, but to be honest, I've got more than enough pencil sets than I know what to do with. So I'm considering either giving them to my granddaughter to play with, but at this point in time she's not really a big fan of using pencils. She's more into textures or markers like her granny is. And I was thinking that I'll either give them to her or put them in her room, you know, where she's got all her colouring bits and bobs and her toys and her stuff. And when she's ready, she might find them and use them. But it got me to thinking that there's a few things that I've got in supplies that I'm hanging on to because I paid money for them, but I'm really not happy with them. Not happy with their performance, and I don't feel like they're adding anything to my enjoyment of colouring. So watching Wendy's video this morning was sort of another prompt that, yeah, maybe it's time to just have a little look and a declutter. Now, I don't think a lot of these leaves actually need too much done to them. I'm quite happy with them the way they are, so I'm not going to play with those too much. I've got this one is deep cobalt green polychromos. So the deep cobalt green is more of a blue green, and it's just helping to establish those darker shadowy areas without introducing a black at this point. I don't really want to ever introduce black unless I really need that darkest of dark detail. And there's a lot of black on here already, so I don't really want to introduce too much black. If I can make my shadows using other colours, I will. So now I'm going to look for a nice deeper brown to start bringing some brown accents in. This one is sepia, or I've heard some people pronounce it sepia. I've always pronounced it sepia myself. I know sometimes with my little hybrid accent that is mostly Australian, but it has a few English words interspersed with it and English sayings and so on. My accent is primarily Australian, and I know that the Australian accent sometimes with the overseas viewers elicits a little bit of humour in how we might pronounce things, but I do pronounce it sepia. So I'm just bringing in a little bit of the brown just to bring in that reinforcement that it is indeed a tree stump. Also darken it a little bit because it definitely would be quite shadowed with the fact that she's sitting on it and she would be casting a shadow, and the fact the moon is all the way up there in that direction, there would definitely be some shadows. And the same here with the rocks. I'm just going to put a little bit just to knock back some of the brightness in these areas where there might be a bit of overlap. It's a bit hard for me to see the camera from where I'm sitting, so I hope that this is showing up on camera okay. I will lift it up to you at the end. And I'm not overthinking this, I'm just doing it quite randomly. I'm not going to blend all of that texture out of it. If I wanted it to remain smooth, I would have kept it all markers, but I didn't. I wanted to introduce the pencils, so therefore I'm going to leave some of this texture because that's just what pencils are. And tree stumps and wood and so on isn't always perfectly blended colour unless it has had a lot of work done to it. And we're looking at a woodland scene, nature. And you know, there's not that many trees that are perfectly smooth in nature. There are a few. There's a gum tree here in Australia that once it loses its bark, I can never remember what its name is, but it loses its bark, and it might be a ghost gum, something like that. And the trunk of the tree is all lovely and eerily glowing and smooth when it has lost its bark. So there are exceptions to everything that you could possibly say. There will always be an exception to it. But yeah, I'm not going to blend all of that detail completely smooth. I don't see a need to. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I like to use my solvent and get my coloured pencils really smoothly blended. But, you know, this particular picture, I don't feel a need for that. So I'm just going to bring a little bit of that into the shadow of her hairline, her hair, pardon me, hair of leaves. It definitely looks like a her to me. So I'm using the sepia for two reasons. One is to reinforce the idea that she's made of wood, or, you know, part tree. And I'm using it in the areas where it needs a bit of shadow. But to actually complete the idea of shadow, I'm going to use a deeper purpley colour. Now I find this colour works really well for shadows. It's actually Delft Blue in the Faber-Castell Polychromos, but it has quite a purple look about it when used as a shadow. And I'm just going to put little hints of that in some areas where I want the most contrast. And this is what I'm going to use instead of black. Now RJ's already put some hatch marks and lines where there would be some texture and some shadows and details and so on. So the print of the book in the black that's in those areas is going to be plenty for my shadows. I think I don't want to go too dark, again because there's so much dark up here already. Now if I did use black, it would probably get some really dramatic results, but yeah, I just don't feel like using black for it myself. So we're just going to put a little bit of that in here, the darkest area. And that's getting quite dark in itself, but it's got a bit of a luminous look about it where you get the catch the bit of purple when the light catches it the right way. It can make it, for want of a better way of describing it, it can make the difference between having very flat and dead areas of shadow when you just use black. When you put extra colour into it, like I'm going to put a little bit in there as well. When you put these extra colours into it, the shadows actually become alive. So instead of being a dead area of your picture, they actually become alive and they really tell, you know, part of a descriptive story about it. That's my thinking anyway. That's the best way. I'm just using a bit of grey here. If you watch the first one, this colour of the rocks was actually called warm grey, but I don't know if it's mislabelled or there's something wrong with the ink. It doesn't look anything like grey to me. So I'm just knocking that back a little bit with the warm grey pencil. And that's the Artex. I'll bring a little bit more into there. I want this to look nice and textured. The warm grey of the Artex pencil is very different to the warm grey of the Ohuhu marker. So we'll just combine the two to get the result that we want. And I feel like the bat is still a little bit too light, but I don't really want to make him black because he'll just disappear. So we'll just knock back some of that brightness with the pencil, and then you'll still be able to see them. Of course, the ones near the moon, for the sake of a picture, it makes sense to have them lighter. But in real life, of course, a bat would be so small that we wouldn't actually see shadows on them when they're in the sky. So there's no realism about this. This is just telling a story through using illustration. But if you think about logic, we aren't going to see those little bats like that. It's just an illustration, it's just a story. It's not real life. And I'm going to use the Prismacolor white to put a little bit of glow. Or actually, instead of the white, what I might do is I've got a few pale blues here. I've got cloud blue, powder blue and sky blue light. I think I might actually use the sky blue light, and I'm going to put a little bit of a glow around the moon. Now what I'm thinking about there is that, you know, sometimes when there's moisture in the air, you've got a fairly clear night, but there's a full moon and there's moisture in the air. You get that sort of halo glow around the moon sometimes. That's what I'm thinking about there. And of course it won't look like that in real life, but I'm just suggesting it. That's the story that I'm telling myself. So, and I'll just put a little bit of blue into the moon itself. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this purple in. For no other reason than I just want to brighten up the black a little bit, because the black ink on the printing is very flat and I don't want it to look too flat. I just want to liven that up a little bit. So that will probably be enough. In a minute I'm going to have a look through the camera screen and just see how that's looking to you. But to me on paper here in real life it's looking like enough. So pop that one away. These little creatures here could do with a little bit of extra shadow on them. So for them I'm going to use, let's have a look. This is dark salmon. Let's see if that gives enough. Yeah, that's probably enough. It's a very strange pinky beige colour that I used on these little critters. When I used it on camera, I didn't quite know how to describe it. It's actually called pear colour, as in the fruit pear. But it's not like any pear that I know or what I'm thinking of as pear colours, so I'm not quite sure whether some of the names of the colours get lost in translation sometimes when you're looking at these names that they come up with. And what I'm doing there again is once again just establishing that little bit of relationship that's going on between those items. And I just want to do a little bit of a shadow under here. I'm going to go for iron oxide brown, just to do that little bit of hint of a shadow. And again, that might be useful just for in the very darkest areas of this little guy. Now my alcohol marker has bled over the dots on the mushroom, so I'm going to use, this is a Montmartre acrylic paint pen, This has been my go-to white pen now for a while. It's only really used for these sorts of little light details and touch-up jobs, so it's actually lasting a very long time. And it has a fine tip and a broad tip, so that fine tip's not really that fine, but it is enough for doing dots, and then the bullet tip is, the broad tip is quite like a marker pen. Now sometimes I find that these creatures that have got little black eyes, it just helps to put a little touch of white for a highlight in there to make them look like they're alive. Sometimes black, you know, when eyes are all perfectly black, they can look really lifeless, like, you know, the creature is not really alive. Might use a lighter colour to see if I can put some highlight on there. But I'm pretty much getting towards the end here, guys. I won't keep you too much longer. So first off, I'm going to put a bit of white on there. I did try the colourless blender, but it didn't work how I expected it to work. So I'm just going to put a bit of white on there for now. And this Ohuhu red marker is quite strong because it's already turned that white acrylic paint pen pink, and that doesn't altogether bother me. It still looks lighter, but I will do another pass over of acrylic paint pen on there, and I'm just going to knock back that white very, very slightly. This is scarlet red, and all I'm doing is just taking the very brightness off of that white and just knocking it back a little bit so that it's not quite so obvious. Let's do another dot of white on those areas. And this little guy's a little bit too small to do that with his eyes. Doesn't really matter for him. The birds aren't really the star of the show there, but they've got a little tiny bit of beak. And I'm just going to put a touch of colour in there. And I'm going to do a little bit here of Wink of Stella. This is a fairly new pen, so it hasn't been working that great yet. But let's see if we can just do a little touch of this where the stars are. And that will just hopefully give a little bit of sparkle. A little bit on the moon. This is a clear one with the silvery glitter. It looks a bit odd while it's wet, but I'm hoping as it dries it won't be so noticeable on the black. You could do the same thing, of course, with a gel pen. I've got a set of, I think it's Colour It gel pens, and there's a really good colour called Crystal, I think it is, and it's almost just perfectly clear with bits of silver glitter in it. Something like that would work as well. I might actually put a little bit on the bat. It's probably not very noticeable to you, but I'll see if I can catch the light when I pick it up. And I'm feeling like that is pretty much done. Maybe just that little stripe in her face could have a bit of colour put into it, couldn't it? What colour will we use? This one is goldenrod. I want just to put a little bit of that in there to bring in a bit of warmth. So because this is very green and very brown, we could also bring in that little bit of the Delft blue that I've used for shadows. We can just bring in a little bit of that here and there. As well. And I'm just thinking my favourite little Faber-Castell Classic pencil here, which is like a very basic neutral. I'm just going to blend some of that in together. And that's making it look very, very solid. And then hopefully a bit lighter in area as we go up and she becomes more human looking. And then once again I'll blend that a little bit more for solidness as we become more tree-like again. So sometimes these lighter colours are really helpful for blending those darker colours in without getting a coloured pencil blender. I don't have one here with me, but I do have some Derwent ones, some Lyra, Splendor, Prismacolor. I've got a few different of the coloured pencil blenders. I don't tend to use them an awful lot, to be fair. I'd prefer to use solvent to blend coloured pencil most of the time. Okay, so I'm starting to fiddle. I will call that quits. So about half an hour, and I have been wittering on and talking a little bit too much. We'll take that blotter page out. And you can see there that the coloured pencil just gives it all a very different texture, especially on her arm here, the trunk, that little critter down there. And then up here I'm leaving it pretty much alcohol marker with no pencil on top. I'm not sure, there you go, can you see that little bit of shine there with the sparkle from the Wink of Stella? So there we go. So there's your Woodland Dryad, my first page completed in Mountain King by R.J. Hampson. And that was a really quite simple, quick colour. If I wasn't talking to you guys and having to think and talk and colour at the same time, it probably would have been about an hour or so's effort, I guess. But there you go. So thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you giving me the feedback when you put your comments on the videos. It's really helpful. I do appreciate it a lot. Thank you all for watching, especially if you watch to the end. It's much appreciated. Even if you watch it in parts, you don't necessarily have to watch it in one sitting, but it's helpful to know that you are watching to the end, because if you're not and it's getting boring and they're too drawn out, please do give me that feedback as well, because it's worth it to know. I don't really want to sort of, bore everyone to sleep, and I also don't want to sit and video for too long if people aren't actually going to want to watch them. So the feedback is really helpful, it's really useful, and I hope you have enjoyed that one. It might have given you some ideas maybe. And if you're going to get this book, I'll be really, really interested in seeing what you do in it. If you post your pictures on Instagram, please do tag me and share them with me, because I'd love to see what you're doing in this book as well. Okay, I hope you're all well, and I will see you all really soon. Bye now.